Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Managing the Need for Laboratory Competence in the Food Supply Chain. To talk about this and much more, joining us is PCB certified trainer and founder CEO at Powerhouse Development, a coaching academy, Miss Mary Ann Concio. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You will have the opportunity to submit test questions to today's presenter by typing your questions in the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will then collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. You can also use the raise hand function. We will unmute you and you will have a chance to ask the question directly to our presenter. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Ms. Concio. Ms. Concio, you may start the presentation.
Thank you, Suzana. Good day, everyone, and it's my pleasure to be talking to you on this topic on food supply chain. And my intention is to be able to integrate this with laboratory competence, particularly the standards of ISO 17025 and ISO 22000. I'm Mary Ann Concio. I'm the founder CEO of Powerhouse Development Coaching Academy. So I am certified in various standards and likewise a practitioner for Six Sigma and Risk. And today I shall be talking about three elements. So I'll be starting off with essentials of food safety, the food chain, recognizing the need for quality for the food chain from farm to fork, and technically beginning with the foundation of GMP, GHP, particularly HACCP, and eventually we'll try to connect this with the components of food safety requirements, and that's where the ISO 22000 comes into the picture, where the requirements of PRPs, OPRPs, HACCP basically comes into perspective to assure not only the quality of food, but food safety. And accordingly, in the assurance of quality and food safety, so I'll connect them to the assurance for test results and possibly measurement, traceability, and calibration using the requirements of 17025. So essentially, ISO 20000 is not a new standard. Basically, it has been a very important standard for the last 11 years, particularly on the concept of assuring that not only do we have quality in our products, but to say inclusive of it is the food safety. So when we speak about FSMS and quality management system, it goes hand in hand in the assurance from farm to fork in terms of the agricultural produce that goes into the food manufacturing all the way to the logistics and transport until it gets into the consumers. So voluntarily, we here in the Philippines basically sees a very relevant application of ISO 22000 since there's so much concern with regards to safety, with regards to the prevention of illnesses, the prevention of foodborne diseases. And not only did, let's say, capture the need of the manufacturing companies, but likewise the stretch of the agriculture, aquaculture, all the way up to the restaurant businesses, which are quite thriving within our countries. Within the food quality and manufacturing assurance for food safety, we try to look into the context of the pre-farm gate. So technically, we have seen standards grow beyond ISO 20000 and likewise beyond ISO 9000, coming from different initiatives from the government, from the growers to the farmers. So even as small as, let's say, vegetable growers and so on. And then until, of course, the previous successes, the previous initiatives of the post-farm gate, which has been extensive in the food processing, packaging industries, all the way up to the retailing and distribution. But what we have seen is within the retail stores where there's so much at stake with regards to the brand and reputation of the company, we have seen the need not only for the assurance of quality, not only of the assurance of food safety, but likewise the reliability of the test. So technically, when there's also the outsourcing process, whenever you look into depending on the core competence of packaging the full product, particularly in the retailing industry, that goes to depend on your full supply chain. We've seen beyond 9001, we've seen beyond 22001, but we've seen the intention to not only guarantee safety, but the quality assurance and tests. So within these gate standards, within this quality assurance, incoming control, there's been increased trust with regards to how we really be fully confident that our product is not just planned well with regards to quality and safety, but our measurements and tests will be reliable to guarantee that the food will really be free from any consequence of foodborne illnesses. So technically, with regards to the consumer, so the range of issues when buying food is not only the first-hand experience, but we're looking in terms of the brand, the experience, the historical exposure, and whenever one brand or one food company is faced with a foodborne issue, the social media is quick to capture them and come up with the ill repute, the goodwill being damaged, and technically the whole social media can actually make a big story out of a single mistake with regards to foodborne diseases. So technically, retail industries have been very careful in the planning of food and all the way up to the assurance that whenever we outsource, whenever we depend on our suppliers to deliver the goods for us, there's always the guarantee that there is food safety and it's supported by the quality mark of the testing and result supported by good measurement system. So we can integrate this that the growth and evolution also can be observed by the growing need to assess the potential failures, that we don't only just look into the quality, we look into the food safety, and eventually we also make sure that the risk accordingly, that the process failures can happen or the testing may not be that reliable, and accordingly the assurance of the uncertainties around the performance of the test may not always be acceptable. So within the system then, so it's not enough that to say a company in a food chain industry only looks into ISO 901, only concept has the plan, but there should be the corresponding support with regards to the overall effectiveness as can be supported by the quality assurance of test. So within this context then of assuring quality, what comes to mind is what then will be the necessary ingredients or components for a company within the food chain. So in the past, we may have seen context of CGMP, good manufacturing practices, as a very important fundamental for manufacturing companies, food processing companies. It has grown into ISO 9000, and the ISO 9000 has grown into ISO plus HACCP. The HACCP has gone into ISO 2000 with SQC and GFSI coming into it. So we also have seen the conversion of 22000 into other standards, BRC included. And eventually, we may also look into integrating all of these management system standards into the assurance for the competence for performing tests and laboratories, particularly for product acceptance and calibrations, 17025. And all of this has seen within the years 1959 up to 2005 the maturity of management system for the food chain. And this concept of, let's say, ISO 901 has been mature, but it has been very much tailored to the needs of the food industry, particularly with the release of 22000 and 17025 in the year 2005. And through the years ensuing, so we have seen that the integration of these two standards is quite essential, not only for the single qualification or certification of a company, but the general integration to guarantee that food safety and reliable testing. So with all of these standards, what can then be assured? We're looking in terms of traceability, reliability, the commitment for the name, the commitment for protecting the reputation of the company. So since one small mistake can actually bring significant new significant damage to a reputation of a food processing company. So we have seen the context of standards growing. So we have seen food manufacturing companies, catering companies, farming, and all of this has been quite involved within the food chain, starting from initiatives of big companies whenever one single mistake could affect the entire reputation that each company has carefully endeavored to protect. Okay. So technically, within this essence of assuring quality and food safety, supported by the reliability of testing and testing assurance and quality, so we can say that it's very much essential to have that focus with the planning and realization of quality and safe products. And with this is where the success factors of food companies dependence on ISO 22000, wherein we look into, firstly, the HACCP strength component with regards to the assurance of food quality and safety. So we look into HACCP, the competencies that can actually identify the risk about what can go wrong, the potential hazards. We look as well in the context of them being aware about the reliability of their controls, the validity of their critical control points, and technically we're looking into making sure that the method of analysis will have to be quite reliable. So critical limits, control points will have to be the essence of making sure that the assurance of foodborne diseases are prevented within the manufacturing until, of course, it gets to the hands of the consumers for intake. Now, a second item that we have been looking at integrating with this HACCP plan and control methods assurance is the monitoring, verification, and validation, which when you look at it, it's not enough to just inspect, it's not enough to just perform the checks and all that. It has to be assured that the monitoring and verification is supported by the reliability, and it will never be compromising the limits that may have to lead to an unsafe level, leading to the doubt or leading to the potential consequence of foodborne illnesses. So within this context then, we see that if we must plan accordingly the conduct of the safe products realization, the most basic we can look at is definitely the prerequisite programs. And that's where GMPs, GHPs, GWPs, warehousing, hygiene, manufacturing practices are quite essential, wherein any effort with regards to HACCP plan will never be sufficient until, of course, we have a good foundation coming from these prerequisite programs. So it begins there. Prerequisite programs becomes the fundamental for beginning the journey for the manufacture of safe products. And eventually, that's when, with the strength of the PRPs, with all of these manufacturing practices, hygiene, sanitation, and all, so that's when the assurance that we know exactly the intended use, the product information comes into the picture to enable a comprehensive and integrative analysis for the hazards and eventual controls accordingly. And the corresponding risk assessment takes care of additional controls which may have to be specific, and this we know as OPRPs, which then becomes the basis for all of the assurance for manufacturing to be following production plan, quality plan, and eventually the HACCP plan. So all of this has been very much useful, very much effective with all companies within the context and objective of assuring safe and quality product. But the question is, was it enough? Because technically, all of this had been the strength of any company before they even think about being in the food business. So when you talk about verification planning, so this is where the measure of the controls that has been identified within the HACCP plan becomes tested as a way to really guarantee quality. And Eventually, this check element of verification, supported by the validation of control measures, becomes essential to be a complement for the assurance of PRPs, HACCP plan, to contribute to food quality and food safety. So what are these then? Within the PRP programs, we're looking at the guarantee that the assurance of non-growth of hazards in work environment are prevented, preventive measures to be able to ensure that food safety hazard levels are contained at the minimum, and technically it will have to be an assurance that the growth of bacteria will never be encouraged and it will always be in a preventive mode. So it must be appropriate to the needs based on the context of what the products are and the facility the manufacturing company resides in. We're looking at layout controls, premises control, utility controls, even maintenance activities and how it impacts on the quality of equipment. We're looking at the link of supply chain for purchase materials, so cross contamination. All such are then essential to make sure that the fundamentals are available to assure food quality safety. And then eventually, we look into this creation of food safety team, which validates the intention and commitment to not just set the fundamentals, but have a constant process of identifying the products and the risk it may have to face coming from the process dependencies, the equipment, the materials, so and the continuous awareness of what are the prevalent and current food safety hazards. We likewise intend to be able to assure that we're clear with the target market, we're clear with the possible sourcing of materials and the interdependencies of the materials, chemical analysis that will have to guarantee that we are clear with the application of the products and the intended market. Likewise, we have to be able to ensure that the flow diagrams are connected with that of the use of materials and the controls that will have to be required eventually. We are looking in terms of the past parameters, the existing control measures that will always guarantee that the consumer, the intended users are protected from the possible limits that may have to be proven unsafe to operate at for consumption at their level. We have seen cases wherein it may have to be safe for a certain group, but of course it may not be appropriate for, let's say, infants or the children. And all of these are things that could have been prevented if there are sufficient analysis of what are the limits with regards to a safe intake and also what are the limits for a safe intake for a particular product group, particular user group. So within this planning of PRPs, the planning of HACCP, preliminary information, of course, that's where all of the decision trees come in, and that's where the decision to be able to apply them for controls come in to complement the full requirements for hazard analysis. And then the operational PRPs are integrated to complement of the hazard analysis and that of the PRPs. We look into translating them into the OPRPs for the particular control for the food safety hazards that were uniquely identified coming from the HACCP plan, and with particular emphasis on what are those hazards that needs to be particularly monitored, tested, verified, and controlled. And within such will have to be the possible risk of how can we fully capture that of the corresponding threats or risk of the safety not being well measured or verified before the full gate of being released to the customer. So technically, with this comes the confirmation that once a HACCP plan is created, all of this necessitates that the fundamentals, the hazard analysis, the OPRPs, the specific controls have been very well taken care of. The next challenge now is how to monitor them, how to take care that such controls will have to be um, complementary, assuring that of the commitment for the food safety that was intended from way onset. Okay, so with that, we declare that somehow the food safety management system, yes, can be very good within the context of verification planning or performance and testing, the counter checking and so on. But how do we really make sure that essentially that everything could be as valid or as reliable, as um, as comforting as it should be with regards to the need to really be free from any risk of foodborne illnesses. And this is where, from the control measures, we then ask, how is the guarantee that the control measures selected from the HACCP plan is actually able to control and monitor accurately the food safety hazards? We're also looking at whether the timing plan, the frequencies are actually, and with such, all of these verification intentions and the hazard levels to be at an acceptable level within the limits that was defined will have to be making sure that all of this leads to conformity and assurance that the product will really be quality and safe. So with such, the final intent of the 22,000 is to make sure that there's significant validation, and that validation is a big word that makes sure that all of such can be confirmed, can be reassured, can be assessed, can be tested, and uncertainties that supports those tests can really be acceptable within the limits set forth by the safe functioning or the safe consumption level for the food. And with that, we look into tests and calibrations. At the initial level, we have seen that we start with tests, but of course, the test can never be as reliable if and when the calibration process that supports the performance of the test is also not reliable. So eventually, within these control measures comes the ISO 901 and of course ISO 22000. And on the next layer, there were need for us to ensure that the gates are not just available, but the gates are actually reliable and can always be assuring the quality of the test. It was supported then with a secondary gate that we see the quality and assurance of the test will not only be supported by the performance, sensitivity, the uncertainties, but likewise the acceptability of the calibration performed. So with such, we're looking at exactly whenever a company is certified to 22,000, do we have to have both test and calibration be proven with competence? Or whenever this will be outsourced, then it will be just plainly the test? Or can these two be outsourced and we can actually ask any provider not just to be 22,000 certified, but to be able to prove to us that they have competence in their test and calibration? Because what are those factors that definitely affect the correctness and reliability of the test? Naturally, it's not just performance in accordance with the HACCP plan or the inspection plan. We're looking into the condition within the laboratory that makes it reliable as it should be. And of course, human factor will always be considered. We're also looking in terms of the reliability of the accommodation facility, whether such is preventive of the uncertainties and the non-reliability of the test, because any vibration, any movement can actually derail the quality of the test. We're also looking in terms of the traceability with regards to the methods used, the assurance that the methods as internationally accepted will have to be consistently followed, and when modifications happen with regards to the equipment and the test, they are all reasonably validated prior use. We're likewise looking into the equipment, and that's why the test will be supported by the calibration of the equipment. We're also looking at traceability with regards to the test, the conditions that is operating simultaneously during the performance of the test. We're looking at the quality of the sampling, the reliability of the sampling methods. We're looking at the handling. So all these factors, whenever any of such will have to be not in order, definitely will have to be creating some test inaccuracies or test unreliabilities. So with that, 17025 comes into the picture, and that's where we look into methods, standards, validation activities, verification protocols, and all such to guarantee that the robustness, the selectivity, linearity, GRNR of all our performance of measurements will then be acceptable within the tolerance of our safe limits for the functioning of the product. And with such, we've seen that as far as companies are concerned, HACCP plan will have to be a good start, but the secondary control in terms of within the HACCP are the tests supported by reference materials, were there correlations done, were there interlab comparisons done. All of this will have to be the icing on the cake, the confirmation that we planned our product well, we planned our product safe, and it will have to be verified and tested with the confirmation of safety and quality all throughout. So all this, when you speak about 17025, all of these are actually very good complement to food safety management system. It may have to be select, not for the full range of products, but of course for those food-borne related parameters, so illness-related parameters. But as long as there is the commitment, not only to produce quality safety, but to also to assure reliability of the test, then we are guaranteed for food safety, and it can be sustained all throughout. So with this then, the component of assuring food quality takes the onset of quality management system and support of technical requirements for the need for testing and HACCP plan, complemented by PRPs, OPRPs, HACCP plan. But of course, at the heart of it, with all of the PRPs and OPRPs, it will never be as reliable unless, of course, there is the complementing, the supporting assurance of quality of tests, and likewise the supporting calibration for the quality of the test. So these three put together, 2000, 17025, and the specific management system for respective industries, PRPs, OPRPs, all the way assures that we will be consuming safe food, and the reputation of the company can always be trusted with the test and reliability it gives to the product. And with this, we feel that these two must be together, if not for certification, but at least for the general commitment for quality and food safety. And with that, I end my presentation. I hope I was able to integrate within your food safety intent ISO 22000 and ISO 17025. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Concio, for this presentation. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your right-hand control panel. So the first question is, if a company wants to implement HACCP and ISO 22000 at the same time, should they do it? And how much would that cost?
How much will it cost? It really depends on the maturity of the company, but basically the cost will really depend on whether you are looking at the full scope and whether you have the fundamentals well in place like GMPs, GHPs, which require certain infrastructure consideration. Now, if we're talking about those infrastructure consideration, it's something of, it depends really on where the company is coming from. But if we're talking about the development of system and certification, so in our country, it varies from $1 million for, let's say, a typical development to 3-year contract for quality and certification. So it really depends whether, are we talking about just the scope, the cost for certification? Are we talking about the full scope, the full cost of preparing the infrastructure accordingly.
Thank you. The next question is, according to the latest ISO survey, we noticed that ISO 22000 certification has low numbers when comparing to previous years. Do you know why that is and what we can do about that?
As far as what I've seen in our country is that all food companies are actually going into 22,000 HACCP and all that. But somehow, when you look into the general intent, so basically they concentrate on the HACCP, and the HACCP is what will give them confidence with regards to the safety of the food, the planning accordingly. But when you speak about 22,000 as a whole, somehow companies are seeing that to say a bigger importance will have to be placed on HACCP than the entire system of ISO 22000. So because technically the tangible side to it is, yes, I have my product, I have my product safety plan, and this works for me, and I can go for reasonable certification that may not necessarily be the 22,000, but just simply certification according to HACCP. So in our country, that's where the choices come in, not necessarily going for the 22,000 for certification, but simply HACCP. And what I have seen then is that they may not necessarily go for 22,000, but the system is there, but they will have to support them with a greater complement for the HACCP as a tangible control for food safety and the 17025 practices as a tangible control for testing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Concha. We are unfortunately running out of time, so all of the other questions will be answered via emails. I would also like to thank all the attendees for attending today's webinar. Once you leave the webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. Also, if you're aware of a topic that you would like to discuss and participants would benefit from, please feel free to write down your suggestions. On behalf of PECB and our presenter, thank you for joining us today and have a great weekend.
Thank you.